Hi everyone, it's Jerry. Let's have a look at a game from 2010. This was played at the Chess Olympiad. On the white end, Vassily Ivanchuk. He's paired against Baadur Jobava. Quite an unusual game in this one, to say the least, and maybe in a way to be expected when you have two highly creative players sitting at the board. Ivanchuk opens with e4. Jobava replying with the Caro-Kann defense. What variation? Fantasy, f3. Two main ideas behind this variation. One, white's prepared to simply maintain this ideal pawn center, this pawn duo, in the event of a capture. Another, and maybe more importantly, interfere. This variation looks to interfere with what it is black would like to do in the Caro-Kann defense. Namely, deploy the queen bishop somewhere outside of this eventual pawn structure. Bishop f5, bishop g4, you can't do that so easily. What follows is queen to b6. Black could have also captured and then struck at the pawn duo, or struck at the pawn duo straight away on move 3. In this one, it's queen to b6. And now we have a3. At first glance, one might peg this as a beginner move, but a3 is largely a waiting move. Waiting for what? Well, what is black going to do next? With this idea in mind, the bishop wants to come outside of the pawn chain. Notice how a couple of the black moves on this move 4 could interfere with the bishop's deployment. Knight d7, e6. Another move black could consider is knight to f6. However, that would eventually transpose into a French defense. White would give the knight a kick with e5, follow up with f4, and the position would take on a closed. It would become much more closed in nature. And the a3 move, which initially is looking to be a waiting move, may actually be justified at some point. a3 would be supporting b4, and play would be ensuing on the queen side some after knight to f6 move. How do you reply to a move like a3? e5. That's the move in the game. Energetically. a3 is not developing how to maybe demonstrate that that is an issue, that that is not best. Strike in the center. Heat things up in the center. This is now volatile. Continuing, we have e takes d5. And black wastes no time recapturing. You could recapture, but this is now all about getting your pieces out, and black does just that. Knight f6. Ivanchuk takes another pawn and attacks the knight. Jobava says, I don't care about my knight. I'm developing. Bishop c5. I'm ready to give a check. I'm maybe ready to take your knight. Go ahead, take my knight. Ivanchuk does. And is content with having the king uncastled. This is what we have in the game. Bishop f2, king e2. And now kingside castle follows. There's now a new piece ready to enter into the attack. Just attacking with 2, one more right around the corner. What to do here? It's important for black at this stage not to just go and get the material back. Taking the knight instead of castling here would allow white to all of a sudden be ahead in development, and this rook would not be able to enter the attack. He has to spend some time maybe trying to track down this passed pawn. So there's no time to go and try and win the material back. Instead, invite more pieces, get some more fuel into this attack. Castles it is on this move 8. Queen to d2 is an only move. What's its point? Let's see. Rook to e8, king to d1. When I made my first pass to this game, once I saw this position, this is really what, made me think, I gotta share this one. This is so odd to have the queen step up, the king step up, and the king is now on the queen square, and white is basically just so underdeveloped after 10 moves. Only has the queen on the second rank. Uncastled. Continuing, we have rook to e1. White has to give up the queen. And let's just pause for a moment. 12 moves in. All white pieces are still on the back rank, but white is up material. How much? Well, what's the material imbalance here? Still has a full rack of pawns. White is still playing with all 8 pawns. So, has 2 pawns, a rook, a knight, and a bishop for the queen. And, let's not forget, has lost the castling privilege. The king did a little triangle, e2, d1, and then back to his home square. Cannot castle. Bishop f5. Black still just gets on with getting the 4 pieces out. That's all black has left, so better get them in play. Bishop to b2. Knight to d7. Notice now white is kind of putting a halt to these captures. You certainly don't want to capture on c6 now and invite the knight to a wonderful square. Bishop e2 in the game, knight d7. Only now do we have this capture, now that black isn't able to recapture with the knight. B takes c6. Bishop to d1 not only defends the pawn, but produces a new square for the knight. Rook to e8 follows, knight e2. Knight takes f6. Knights are now connected. How will white complete development here? We have in the game bishop to c8. A better move is to throw the knight into d5 and focus in on the e3 square. Jobava with bishop to c8 looks to pinpoint this knight. a4 follows, a5, and rook to f1. What's the point of this? Well, it's tough to get the rook activated. It's tough to create a pawn exchange and an open file for the rook, so white has to do awkward stuff. Rook f1, and now rook f2, lending support to this pinned knight. Continuing, we have h5 producing a flight square, and maybe at some stage this guy could become passed. It's a stretch, but you might as well throw him up 2 squares instead of 1 here. Rook a3, so awkward. Rook f1 to f2, rook a3 to b3. This is how the white pieces are slowly finding activity. h4 follows, g3 and h3. Black has some hope of maybe one day capturing on h2, and then this guy becomes passed. Continuing, we have g4, rook to d8, knight f4, knight d7, and rook to b3. So this queen, what happens next is quite interesting. This black queen goes very deep behind enemy lines. She's attacked. Queen d4, knight to e2. This knight is now pinned. There is no capture of the queen. Knight e4 is now unpinning the e2 knight. Knight takes queen is a threat. Queen takes a4. Bishop to d2. Queen a1. And bishop to c3. Look at how deep this queen is in the white position. But white has a lot of pieces around that are defending the white king. Knight e5 follows. Rook to a3. This queen is actually very short on squares. Queen to b1. Knight goes back to d2. She only has 1 square. Queen c1. And what to do here? You cannot take the queen. Taking the queen and you get mated in 1 move. Knight takes f3. All the squares are covered. That's a double check mate. Can't take the queen, so what does Ivanchuk do? Takes a pawn. Hits the bishop, hits the knight, and what follows is knight g6. So, doing something else, like saving the bishop, you would end up having, well, the move that's played in the game. So let's see what this is. In the game, it's knight g6, the bishop is captured, and after now knight to f4, the move that we would have had if the bishop got out of the line of fire, and this here is the final move of the game, rook to a8, and black resigns. What to do here? Capturing the rook on a8, and your queen can now get picked off. And maybe the most interesting variation at this point, if the game continued, well, first, the threat here is to take the rook and then take the queen. What are you doing about this threat? Suppose knight g2 here. The knight can actually be captured, and after recapture, we can take this rook, and then take the queen, allowing black to produce a new queen. But after knight to f1, I think this is just no match. Of course, we would have 2 knights, 2 bishops, a rook, and 2 pawns, and that is far greater than a single piece here, a queen. But this here is as far as it went. After rook to a8, Jobava throws in the towel, resigning. What a wild game. I just had to share this one with you when I made my first pass through it. Certain things just caught my attention, and yeah, what an unusual game we had here between 2 highly artistic players. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below, and I hope you enjoyed it. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.